Welcome to the assignment overview, Angles and Trigonomic Ratios 4.04. Our key concept for trigonomic ratio is to solve problems involving indirect measures in right triangles. We need to understand tangents, sines, and cosines. The tangent of an angle, abbreviated TAN, is the ratio of the length of the leg opposite the angle to the length of the leg adjacent to the angle. The sine of an angle, abbreviated SIN, is the ratio of the length of the leg that is opposite the angle to the length of the leg of the hypotenuse. The cosine of an angle, abbreviated COS, is the ratio of the length of the leg that is adjacent to that angle divided by the length of the hypotenuse. Today we're going to talk about the inverse, and I'm no longer going to use opposite in place of inverse. I'm going to start using the word inverse, which we have used in the past as opposite, such as the opposite of multiplication is division, the opposite of addition is subtraction, the opposite of subtraction is addition, the opposite of multiplication or division is multiplication. The word inverse is interchangeable. So the inverse of multiplication is division. Well, the inverse of tangent is tangent to the power of -1. This is the angle that has a given value as its tangent ratio. Another name for inverse tangent is arctan or arctangent. For example, suppose you want to determine the measure of angle A. We can use that ratio tan A because A is our theta. Now, we're going to type the ratio below using tan to the power of -1. Find the approximate measure of angle A. Remember, this is opposite over adjacent. So all we have to do is type in 97, which is the measure of the opposite leg, divided by the measure of the adjacent leg. That means that this is approximately 10, we're going to say 11 because it's 10.979. So if we go ahead and round it to a whole degree, we can say that A is approximately 11 degrees. If you know the measure of an angle, you can use the calculator to find the tangent ratio, such as 30.96 for angle X. We would do this by typing in tan 30.96. That gives us the ratio, which is 599.911. The same is true with the inverse. So now if we know the ratio, 0.5999, we can type in tan to the power of -1 and input that ratio, 0.5999, and it gives us the angle measurement. If you know the lengths of two legs of a right triangle, then you can use the tangent ratio, the sine or the cosine ratio to find the measure of each acute angle. In a similar way, you can use the inverse sine and inverse cosine to determine the measures of an acute angle in a right triangle. The inverse sine is abbreviated sine -1. This is the angle that has a given value as its sine ratio. Another name for the inverse of sine, just like tangent, is arc sine. So we can abbreviate that ARC-SIN. The same is true with the inverse of cosine. We can abbreviate that ARC-COS. In this question, we're looking for the measure of angle B. Which inverse ratio would we use? Pause the video and see if you can figure it out. We notice when we look at B that we can draw an arrow to the opposite. So the opposite is 10. We have that ratio. And we notice that we also have the hypotenuse. So if we have the opposite and we have the hypotenuse, then that means we're going to use the inverse of sine. Just in case you haven't noticed yet, it is very, very important that you remember these trigonomic ratios. Sine is always opposite divided by hypotenuse. Cosine is always adjacent divided by hypotenuse. And tangent is always opposite divided by adjacent. It is extremely important that you remember SOHCAHTOA, sine opposite hypotenuse, cosine adjacent hypotenuse, tangent opposite adjacent. Let's see if we can solve this problem together. Notice the question mark is on angle A. I can draw an arrow from angle A to the opposite side. I do have the opposite side here. And then I notice that I don't have the hypotenuse, but I do have the adjacent to angle A. Therefore, I'm going to use tan theta because I have the opposite and the adjacent. Then since I have the opposite and I have the adjacent, I can go ahead and use the ratio 5 divided by 7 in order to determine what the value of the angle is. I'm going to need to use the inverse tan. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say arctan, if I can spell it correctly, arctan is equal to 5 divided by 7. Therefore, angle A is 35.5377. Let's go ahead and try another one. In this triangle, I'm again looking for the angle measure for A. If I draw a line from the angle to the opposite side, I notice that I do not have this measurement. I do, however, have the adjacent and the hypotenuse. So I know that I'm going to use arc cosine for the adjacent and the hypotenuse. Then I'm going to plug in the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. And I see that angle A measures 41.4096. Let's go ahead and do one more together. Here I'm going to find the measure of angle B. If I draw a line from angle B to the opposite side, I see that I have the opposite. I also notice that I have the hypotenuse because it's across from the 90-degree angle. So here I'm going to use arc sine, and I want to show you too that you can use the power to -1 in the calculator. I like to use arc sine because I can type it, but I want to show you both of these. So arc sine, and then we're going to say opposite divided by hypotenuse, and that tells us that the measure of angle B is 263878, In this question, they're asking you to round it to the nearest tenths place. So you're going to go ahead and say 26.4 because an 8 is 5 or above, so we give it a shove. But like I said, I would like for you to see that you can also do to the power of -1, and it will give you the exact same answer because arc sine and sine to the power of -1 is the inverse operation of sine. If you have any questions on this assignment overview, please feel free to reach out.